Yeah. Deepak, can you see participants in there joining in?
No, ma'am. Right now we are in practice session.
अच्छा, आप अभी लाइव मत करना बट सेशन नॉर्मल ले लीजिए ताकि आई कैन सी हाउ मेनी हैव जॉइंड. Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to thank you all for joining. Kindly give me another 5 minutes so that others can also join, and then we'll start the session. Thank you. Anil sir, are you here with us?
Yes, I am here.
Okay.
Let me know when you want to start.
Yes, sir. Now we are going to start. So
Okay.
would you like me to screen the presentation for you?
No, I'll share myself.
Okay, thank you. So good afternoon, everyone. I am Vatsala Khare, lead of mentorship program at Startup Incubation and Innovation Center, IIT Kanpur. I welcome you all to this another exciting session, which is going to be a very informative one for certifications. This session is titled as Understanding Options for Certifications. The previous session, which we did, was specifically for medical devices. This is a generic certification session, and the speaker is our own mentor, Mr. Anil Johari. Sir is the former CEO of the National Accreditation Board for certification bodies. He has been a constituent member of the Quality Council of India and National Accreditation Body for Certification and Inspection attached to Ministry of Commerce and Industry. He has over 4 decades of experience in the field of quality standards, certification, accreditation, and technical regulations. He has worked earlier in the Bureau of Indian Standards, the National Standards Body, and the Export Inspection Council, India's official export regulator and the certification body under the Ministry of Commerce and Commerce. He has led to development of a number of voluntary confirmatory assessment schemes across sectors, from yoga professionals to medical devices to good agricultural practices to food safety, private security agencies, traditional medicines, Ayurveda tradings, and supported a number of regulators in developing systems for the use of third-party inspection certification in sectors such as food, oil, gas, medical devices, etc. He is currently associated with a number of organizations, such as he is the member of CDM Accreditation Panel for UNFCCC since 2007. He is on the board of Yoga Certification, Naturopathy Registration, Ayurveda Training Accreditation Board set up by the Ministry of Ayush. He is also the member of Accreditation Approval Committee of ASI, Bonn and ASI North America. He is also an evaluator for ISEAL Alliance for Sustainability Standards and Certification Schemes. Sir chairs the steering committee Good Clinical Practices Professional Certification Scheme of the CDSA STEAM. He is also the co-chair of the steering committee for voluntary certifications in biomedical sector, the AMTZ. He is now nationally and internationally recognized as an expert, having worked in such international bodies such as UNFCCC, UNIDO, PTB, FAO, APO, and IFC. And he has also been invited as an expert by WTO in previous years. Now I would like to give the floor to Anil sir and request you all to please participate actively with your queries. Please post all your questions in the chat box and we'll be taking them up timely. Thank you, sir. Anil sir, your floors. Yeah, please.
And thanks, Vatsala. You can see the screen and see the presentation.
Sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah, thank you very much, Vatsala. I'm very happy to be here to be of some help to our startups here. So you had asked a question about certifications, a variety of certifications. I thought a short presentation so that people understand precisely what certification means and what kind of certifications are available in the market, so that then they can decide what certification to go for. Either they are obliged to go for or they have an option to go.
Yes.
So let me start. Yeah, okay. So first thing to understand is that as a manufacturer, if you intend to go into manufacturing, you will face multiple challenges relating to standards. Two clearly distinct regimes you will face. One is of regulations. There are regulations on grounds of health, safety, national security, environment, deceptive trade practice. In food, they are called SPS measures. In TBT agreement of WTO, they are called technical regulations, where hello, can you hear me?
Yes, sir, you're audible.
Yeah, sorry. Vatsala, can you share the presentation? Because
Okay.
my PC has given me some trouble and I am on my mobile now.
No issues, sir. Here it
Yeah.
is.
Okay. So what I was explaining was that there are two very distinct regimes. One is which is obligatory, which is compulsory, which is on grounds of health safety. For example, medical devices would be one of them, where you have to comply with certain standards. Food is one, medical device is another. Uh, uh, so that is one challenge that you face. These are actually called now technical regulations. In food, they are called SPS measures. Other than food, they are called technical regulations. And second is voluntary standards. In fact, standards now means voluntary standards, which means you have an option. And these voluntary standards are those where compliance is not compulsory. You decide based on your need whether you want to go for a particular voluntary standard and certification or not. So that is the distinction you should understand, and these are the challenges you will face. A, is there a regulation in your sector? If there is a regulation, what is the method of compliance that is being sought? B, is your customer demanding a certification, or is the market has certain certifications, your competitors are having certain certifications, so you should also have. So that is where you have options to pick up one certification or the other. So can you go to the next slide? So these are the two distinct regimes. Then there are varying modes available how you can demonstrate compliance, whether it is regulation, whether a standard, let's say you loosely, I'm still using the word standard. Let's say standard is part of a regulation or a standard is voluntary. Either way, you have to demonstrate compliance to that standard. And there are various methods. They can be used individually or they can be used in combination. For example, if it's a product, testing is one easy way of demonstrating compliance. You test the product and see whether it complies with the standard or not. Now, if it is a process, maybe testing cannot be done. If you want to check GMP in a food factory or in a pharma factory, you have to do some inspection or an audit. Then certification, another term used, which is in a way continuing assurance. When you do inspection, it's a one-time inspection. I go to a factory, audit its say GMP, give a report, and I'm off outside, gone. That's it. But when I grant certification as a certification body for a particular period, say 3 years, then I am also taking responsibility that this factory will comply with the standard on a continuous basis. And therefore, I have a system of having surveillance audits, surprise audits, other kind of surveillance activities, so that I keep checking that the factory is following what needs to be done. And this can apply to not only factories. That's one simple example. I mean, manufacturing is one area, but services also. It can apply to processes also. Organic is a process. Organic certification is there. It also applies to persons. You can certify persons. I set up a scheme once for certifying yoga teachers. It's still going on in the name of Yoga Certification Board. So regulators normally, product regulators, technical regulation is about product regulation. product regulators normally rely on testing, number one, and rely on sometimes on inspection. This is global scenario that they normally rely on testing and normally rely on inspection. Certification is not globally a norm prescribed under regulation, except one area where I can see that globally everybody is prescribing certification, and that is organic. Whether it's USDA, whether it's EC, whether it's India, organic certification is popular everywhere and prescribed by regulation. Now we are talking only regulations right now. So by law, it is prescribed that this is the organic standard and this is the certification process. And there are a number of certification bodies. You can go to any certification body and get sort of certified to organic. Or quality management systems in medical devices, especially those of you who are dealing with medical devices would know that medical devices rules of India also, EC also, and even USFDA now, they are either referencing ISO 13485 or requiring quality management systems based largely on ISO 13485. So please remember again that regulators normally do not require certification. Regulators normally would rely on product testing, normally would rely on an inspection or an audit, and not really certification, except as I said, organic is one area where I can see certification. But voluntary regimes are extensively using certification. So you will find that there are very many voluntary certifications going around the world, and you'll have to really find out which one suits you, which one is suitable for you, which one is demanded from you. Because please remember, certification means cost. So every certification that you take, you will have to incur some cost. So it has to be a business decision where you want to put money, which will, help you gain more clients. And you may not want to put money where one client comes and says, do you have X certification? And you realize that X certification costs too much for one client, I'm not going to have it. But if some other clients are coming and saying Y certification, 20 clients are asking Y certification, you will go for Y certification. So this is how a demonstration of compliance is done. Please, next. Now there are, so what is certification? Let's be clear, there's a definition of certification, which means third party attestation. Third party means independent. Why we say third party? Because first party is the manufacturer or the service provider. Second party is the buyer or the user. So though two people are involved in the transaction, you manufacture, I buy, we are involved in this transaction. A third party which is not involved in this transaction, which has no interest, no vested or commercial interest in this transaction, certifies that this product or service meets a particular standard. That is called third party. So third party attestation means independent, related to an object of conformity assessment. Conformity assessment, I think simple English, assessment of conformity to a particular standard. What is object of conformity assessment? Please see what is in red below. The object could be, you are certifying a product. You can certify a process, as I said, organic, good agricultural practice. These are processes. Product, of course, so many are there. Bottled water, biscuits, electric irons, medical devices, etc. You can certify an organization. You can certify a facility. You can certify a management system like QMS, quality management system. You can certify a person. As I said, person certification is also possible. Welders, globally, welders are certified. Globally, information security professionals are also certified. So this is what certification is. Next. So different kind of certifications I have already spoken about. Go back. Product certification, ISA mark. I am sure many of you have seen ISA mark. You've seen EG mark also. Both are product certifications. I have given one example of England where there's something called kite mark. Process certification, organic, good agricultural practices. Services like training, like education can be certified. System certification, which is earlier we started with quality management systems in 1987 when ISO 9001 came. But post that, lot of management system standards have come focused on different aspects. Quality management systems, ISO 9001. Environment management systems, ISO 14001. Food safety management systems, ISO 22000. Information security management systems, ISO 27001. Occupational health and safety management systems, ISO 45001, and so on and so forth. Number of them are there. And of course, personal certification, as I spoke about, yoga, welders, You could certify plumbers, you could certify electricians, and globally, as I said, a lot of information security professionals are certified. This is especially useful where there may not be any formal education. If I'm an engineer, I've got a degree. If I'm a doctor, I've got a degree. But an electrician may not have a degree. A welder may not have a degree. There may not be formal education. So then you use this concept of personal certification, evaluate their competence and certify them. Define first what is competence, which is means knowledge and skills. What is the knowledge needed? What is the skill needed to perform a particular job? Then evaluate them by way of, say, written test or a practical examination or an interview, whatever way, whatever is suitable to that situation, and then certify. Next. So as I said, globally, it's not a norm to use certification. Now that you know what certification is, globally, it's not a norm to prescribe certification in regulations, except, as I said, organic. But in developing countries, this has been a norm. In Western countries, this has not been a norm. In developing countries, India also has this norm. And normally, this is being done by national standards bodies. I think one reason has been that in a developing country, the technical competence is far less. So initially, the standards body is the only technical body seen which is competent. So you hand over in India also, BIS was formed in 1947. In 1952, government said, why don't you start certification also against your own standards? So 1952 onwards, certification started. And at some point of time, government said, okay, let's make it compulsory for certain products. So a concept of mandatory or compulsory certification came in. Now, this is being used in several countries, not only in India. All our neighboring countries are using the same model. Each one of them has a standards body which is involved in certification. Many African countries are doing the same. Many Gulf countries are doing the same. So, I mean, it's not that this is peculiar Indian model. There are a number of countries who are using certification by national standards bodies as a means of regulation. Next. So in India, the scene is that under BIS Act, Bureau of Indian Standards Act, which is an act under which BIS has been set up. BIS was born as Indian Standards Institution. That's why that ISA mark in 1947. In 1986, government made it a statutory body by passing an act called Bureau of Indian Standards Act 1986, which was revised in 2016. Now, its current act is Bureau of Indian Standards Act 2016. Under that, there is a provision that government, please remember the government, not BIS, the government can notify any product or service for compulsory compliance to a standard and can also prescribe certification as a means of demonstrating compliance. So under BIS Act now, there are a lot of what are called quality control orders. You maybe, if you are reading newspapers, you will find every third day, fourth day, there is a news about some QCO being issued or being planned to be issued, or its timeline is being extended because a lot of new QCOs have come in last 5 years. So India at one stage discovered that we are deficit in technical regulation. So an exercise was undertaken to bring in more regulation, and a lot of regulations have come. For example, textiles was unregulated, now there are regulations. Chemicals was unregulated, now there are regulations. Medical devices were unregulated till even COVID time in 2020. Now there are regulations. Toys were unregulated, now there are regulations. So a lot of regulations have come. And most of these prescribe BIS certification. So this is compulsory, you go to BIS and get certified. A lot of sectors are covered, as I said, including electronics and IT, which might interest you, electrical appliances. But medical devices is not one of them. Medical devices rules say you comply with BIS standards, does not say certification. Please remember the difference. Compliance to BIS certification, BIS standard. Compliance to BIS standard is one thing. Certification to BIS standard is another thing. Now, in addition to what has been prescribed under BIS Act, what are called QCOs, some of the regulators have, in their own act or under their own act, prescribed BIS certification as compulsory. For example, Food Authority has prescribed that BIS certification is compulsory for bottled water, mineral water, infant milk food. There are 4, 5, 6 products. Although lately they have taken a decision to withdraw it. So shortly this is going to be withdrawn, but as of today it exists. So you will find every water bottle will have an ISI mark. If you look at, even if right now you are having a water bottle in front of you, pick it up, see on the label, you will find an ISI mark on that label. Similarly, Atomic Energy Regulatory Board, which regulates anything related to radiation, prescribed that for X-ray machines, you must have BIS certification. So you will find that AERB will not entertain you unless you go to BIS and get a certification. Similarly, there's another regulator called Petroleum and Explosive Safety Organization, PESO, which looks after, for example, LPG cylinders or compressed, high pressure cylinders, etc. They also prescribe that you should have BIS certification. So BIS certification is compulsory under other acts also. Now, if you want to see a complete list of where BIS certification is compulsory, I have given the link here. You can go to this link on BIS website and a complete listing is available. Which standard, which product, under what act, and what is the exact quality control order or notification, government gazette notification, under which that compulsory certification has been prescribed. But as I said, some regulators prescribe only compliance to BIS standards, not certification. Please remember the difference. For example, medical devices rules, for example, even cosmetics under CDSCO. So their certification is not a requirement. You can demonstrate compliance just by testing. You don't have to go for certification. Because certification has a cost. Please remember, every certification has a cost. It's certification probably is the costliest way of demonstrating compliance. Testing is part of certification. So naturally, testing is less costly. I just get my sample tested in a lab and show that I am complying. That is less costly than going for BIS with the test report, getting sample tested and getting certified will cost me much more. So please remember this difference, whether in the regulation, compliance to BIS standards is prescribed or compliance to BIS standard and certification of BIS is prescribed. These are two separate things. Next. Then comes the voluntary side, the voluntary certifications. Now, typically, as I said, national standards bodies were the hub of creating voluntary standards, and then they also became certification bodies, not only in India, but as I said, including in Britain. BSI, British Standards Institution, is a globally known certification body also. It's a standards body and a certification body. So it's not that only developing countries. Actually, BIS followed the BSI model, but BSI in developed economies is just an exception. Most standards bodies in developed economies do not do certification today. Now BIS has nearly 21,000 standards, nearly 12,000 product standards, which will be amenable for certification. And out of those 12,000, about 600 are under regulation. The list that I showed you, the link that I have given to you, if you go to that link, you will find about 600 odd standards, 600 plus. And there are under 1,000 standards which are under voluntary certification. So still, it makes a figure of only 1,600 standards. You can imagine the number of product standards is 12,000, only 1,600, 1,700 standards are under regulation or under certification, voluntary plus regulatory, both mixed put together. So there's a huge gap still in India. Then there are these management systems, or what are popularly called ISO certifications, which is ISO 9001, ISO 14001, for medical devices, ISO 13485, for food safety, ISO 22000. And these are very, very popular, but these are generally market demand, except ISO 13485, which is required by regulation in certain ways in Europe, in US, and in India. India's Schedule 5 is QMS, doesn't say 13485, but if you implement 13485, you will meet Schedule 5. So these are the voluntary certifications which are very popular globally. Then there are industry level certifications. If you are in aerospace industry, if you are in automotive industry, if you are in telecom industry, there are certification systems like IATF 16949 for auto industry, AS 9100 for aerospace, and TL 9000 in telecom. If you are a component maker, for example, for aerospace, if you are making components for Boeing or any other aircraft manufacturer, he will ask you that you must be AS 9100 certified. Then only you will get to supply. Much of this is driven by industry giants who are looking for good component suppliers, and therefore they have created these certifications so that they can be assured of a good supply of components. So IATF 16949 is also like that.
AS9100 is also like that. Telecom TL9000 also like that. In India also, we have some voluntary certification schemes. In fact, I was the one who was responsible for creating outside. Earlier, BIS and AGMAR were the only two. I was the one who was responsible for creating outside of BIS and AGMAR. We have an Ayush Mark scheme for Ayush products, which is a voluntary scheme. You can get certified to global standards. We have an ICMET scheme for medical devices. Again, you can get certified to global standards. Because remember, MDR medical devices rules requires compliance to BIS standards. And sometimes BIS standards, many times rather, BIS standards are not globally aligned. And therefore, if you want to access global market or demonstrate that you meet global standards, ICMET was positioned to fill that need. There is something called INDGAP for good agricultural practices. There is something called India HACCP. HACCP, you know, is very popular in food sector. But please remember, the Codex HACCP standard, which is the mother standard for HACCP, is not certifiable, cannot be used for certification. It's a guidance standard. Guidance standards are not certifiable. And therefore, you have to rewrite it in the form of a requirement standard, which we did. And we created India HACCP, so you can go for India HACCP certification. I spoke about in object of conformity assessment, facility certification. Here is one, ready mix concrete plant certification, which doesn't certify the product really. It certifies the facility. That facility has the necessary machinery, necessary infrastructure, competent manpower, etc., to produce, quality ready mix concrete. And there's another scheme owner called NCCF, Network for Conservation and Certification of Forests, which is into forest certification. Which also includes something called agroforestry, trees outside forest certification. So there are a few certification schemes by NCCF also. Next. Then there is another, breed of certification which is very popular in the market called private standards and private certification. That includes hugely popular sustainability certification. Now, these certifications have come up because of these concerns about sustainability in the world market, about social concerns like use of child labor, fair wages, worker safety, these kind of concerns. Also because of reputational risk. If I am a big name like McDonald's, and tomorrow something bad happens in my outlet because of a bad food product, I get the bad name. I may also get sued. I may be made liable in the court for causing, say, some health issue for people who ate a burger from my outlet. So I want to doubly sure that whatever I'm serving comes from sources which are reliable. So these private certifications have come up, which are also being imposed on the industry in addition to regulations. So, for example, if you want to export to Europe, certainly you have to meet the European regulations. Food regulations are very stringent. On top of it, the buyer will tell you, do you have BRC certification, which is called British Retail Consortium, or do you have FSSC 22000 certification, or do you have IFS certification? So these are the kind of private certifications which are operating in the market. Or if you are exporting agri produce from India, even from India, you will be asked, do you have a Global Gap certification? By the buyer. That is a buyer's requirement. Or if you are in textiles, there is something called Global Organic Textile Standard, or there is something called Textile Exchange. So there are private schemes, even in information security. These certifications are demanded by your customers, not by the regulators. Regulators will lay down the law. Legal requirements have to be met with. Once you meet the regulatory requirements, your troubles are not yet over. The market says, or the buyer says, I want XYZ certification, where you have a choice. In legal requirements, you have no choice. You have to meet them. If it's an Indian law, you have to meet them. If you want to export to Europe, EC regulations, you have to meet them. Without that, you can't export. But when it comes to voluntary certifications, you have a choice. You decide, as I said earlier, that one customer is asking for X certification. Nobody else is asking. I don't want to go for the X certification. I will rather not deal with this customer. But if 20 customers are demanding Y certification, then I have to look at it. Why they are asking for this? Let me go for this, invest some money, and I'll get some more business. Now, if you want to see a list of sustainability certifications or standards, I have again here at the bottom, you can see I have given a link. There are 300 plus, please remember 300 plus sustainability certifications going around in this world. Many of them are applicable to Indian industry in textiles, in food, even in something called granite stone. There is a certification called Better Stone certification. So all kinds of certifications are there. Social certifications are there. SA 8000 is there. Something called Social Accountability 8000. So number of certifications are there. So you have to now, in case of voluntary certifications and private certifications, both are voluntary. Voluntary, private is also voluntary. Only the difference is voluntary. When I say voluntary, I mean okay, it's done by the national standards body. It's a structured system. Private certifications anybody can make. Any private party can make. For example, SA 8000 is made by an institute in US called Social Accountability Institute. They created a standard. They created a certification system. Today, it's operating all over the world. Similarly, Global Gap was earlier known as Europe Gap. It's born out of a small building in, I have been to that office in Cologne in Germany. And today it was Europe Gap, then it became Global Gap when it spread globally. So these are private standards. These choices have to be made based on business demand. Next. So what should you do? I mean, as a startup also, as a new manufacturer or looking for an endorsement of a product. Number first, always look at whether you are under a regulated category. If your product has health or safety implications, you can be reasonably sure it would be under regulation. If it is not under regulation in India, it will be in regulation elsewhere, because we are, as I said, we had a deficit of technical regulation. We are still trying to bridge that deficit. For example, machinery safety still not regulated in India. There's a draft regulation, still not regulated. Then you need to identify that regulation and look at what is the method of compliance prescribed. It may not always be certification. If it's a quality control order, certainly it will say BIS certification. If we are talking of QCOs, all QCOs will require BIS certification. But if it's a regulation under FSSAI, if it's a regulation under CDSCO, drugs, cosmetics, medical devices, Ayush or pharma, both kind of drugs, it may not require certification. AERB requires for X-ray, for other things may not require certification. So you will have to precisely look at the regulation, look at what is the method of demonstrating compliance which is prescribed under the regulation. If certification is prescribed, then you have to go for it. In most cases, it's BIS. As I said, for organic, the APIDA has a system. There are multiple certification bodies. The list is available on APIDA website. And the same APIDA system is available, applicable to FSSAI also. In FSSAI regulation, they refer to the APIDA system. So both domestic market as well as for export, if you are in organic field, you have to go to one of these certification bodies. Again, I have given the link. You can go there. So it's either BIS or it is APIDA website for organic. There is no other, to my knowledge. EGMARK, okay, lest I forget, FSI has also prescribed, I think, for 2 products, EGMARK certification, but that is also being withdrawn, like BIS certification is being withdrawn. So in future, you will not require certification under Food Authorities Act. You will only require to demonstrate by way of testing or by way of inspection, food safety audit by notified bodies, notified agencies, and there is no certification will be needed in future. The decision has already been taken. Only final notification is to be issued. The day it is issued, that certification will be gone. Now, if you are looking for endorsement, you have a product and you think I want some endorsement for my product, then the best way is to look for whether there is a BIS standard. If BIS standard is there, very good. Then you can go to BIS and ask that please certify me. Voluntary certification. I am talking now voluntary BIS certification. We have talked about the regulatory BIS certification under quality control orders. That's one part. But you have a product which is not under regulation, but you still want somebody to attest that this product is good. So first option should be to look at whether BIS has a standard. If BIS has a standard, go ahead and get yourself certified against BIS standard, apply to BIS. Some schemes like in QCI we have created for Ayush product or medical devices, those are options available. Otherwise, if your buyer is demanding, if market is demanding, if you are aware that, okay, in my field, this certification is prevalent, then you have to identify which is that certification and go for that. For example, there are some specific US-based certifications which have certain popularity. There's something called NSF. It's a certification body, US based. So on some products you can see NSF logo also. NSF certifies those products. UL, the Underwriters Laboratory, is another US body. Especially in product safety, they have a good name in US and globally. So in some areas some may ask you that you please get UL certification. There is something called FM approval also for some of the electrical equipment. So you will have to identify, when it comes to voluntary certification, you have to identify either your buyer is demanding something, then you have to look for that. B, on your own, you want to go for some certification so that you can get endorsement for your product and marketability by saying, see, I have been certified by XYZ. Then the best is to go to BIS in the first instance. Or if there is in your sector, you are aware there's a prevalence of that kind of certification, go for that certification in the market. Another option is, of course, the ISO certification. ISO 9001 certification is applicable to cross sectors. Anybody can get ISO 9001 certification, whether you are manufacturing or you are in a service sector, you are small or you are large, you are in a regulated sector or unregulated sector. ISO 9001, lot of pharma units have taken ISO 9001 certification because it has certain value, it has certain benefit, and it sells in the market. So any of these certifications you can do. Next. A short summary of how BIS certification operates. You should look at whether there's a BIS standard, download it because BIS standards are freely downloadable today from BIS website. Go to BIS website, download the standard, free. If it is under certification, there will have something called a product manual. Search for a product manual, download that manual also. It will also give lot of information on how certification is granted, how it is maintained. Then, wherever the manufacturing site is, BIS has a number of offices all over India. The nearest office will be the one which will tackle you. So you have to identify which is the nearest office to you, under whose jurisdiction you fall. Go there and apply. Of course, you don't have to go there to apply. You can apply online in the prescribed form. Then the normal model of BIS is they will do an inspection in your factory. They will draw a sample from your factory. They will send that sample to an independent lab. BIS has a system of recognizing labs. Once the sample passes, once the factory inspection is satisfactory, they'll grant you what is called a license. In BIS terminology, it's not called certification. It's called a BIS license. You will get a BIS license. Subsequently, they introduced a simplified procedure where you get your sample tested in a BIS approved lab and apply along with the test report. They will grant you certification without inspection, but within 6 months, they'll carry out an inspection and independent testing. And if your sample fails, your license can get suspended. There is another simpler model called registration, which was specially started for electronics and IT industry. Now it is applied to solar industry also, solar panels, etc., where you get your sample tested in a BIS approved lab, apply to BIS with that test report, BIS will register you, and that's it. And periodically you will have to renew that registration. In the first 2 models, there are periodic inspections by BIS. In this last registration model, there is no BIS inspection of your premises. So these are the some of the certifications, some of the processes of certification that BIS has in case you want to go for BIS certification. Next, please. So to sum up, first thing is you have to identify what kind of certification you are looking for. Is it a regulatory requirement? Clearly, is it a regulatory requirement? That there is no option but to go for it. Is it a market demand? Then you have options. What is more in demand? What is suitable to your pocket? What is suitable to your audience? What is your audience? As I said, regulatory bodies, if they have the prescribed certification, the list of approved certification bodies will be on their website. If you go to CDSCO website, the list of notified bodies is there. Even though they don't prescribe certification, they only audit, but list of notified bodies there. If you look at Food Authority, a list of notified bodies in there. They also don't prescribe certification. They only say food safety audit agencies, but the list is there. So it will always be there on their website. When it comes to the market demand, you have to think about it. Different buyers may have different certifications demanded. You will have to weigh in the benefits, decide which certification suits you, suits your pocket, suits your audience. Now, if you have a target audience which is overseas also, then the demand for certification vary. The Indian audience demands something, the foreign audience may demand something more. So you have to be careful about that. And of course, as I said, uh, certifications like ISO 9001 are evergreen kind of certifications. If nothing is there, no product standard is there, no product certification is available, you can certainly go for ISO 9000 certification and claim to the word that you have a quality management system within your organization and you are capable of producing a good quality product. So this is the short presentation that I wanted to do. I will end here and let's see what are questions, because what Vasla had to me had mention of peso, had mention of CE. Now let me tell you about CE. Okay. CE mark is a European regulatory mark. It is prescribed by European regulations, number of regulations. It could be MDR, which is medical device regulation. It could be ATEX regulation. It could be any kind of regulation. It could be construction product directive. So Europe has number of regulations. All those products or electrical electronic products, your chargers are having CE mark. Mobiles may have CE mark. It's there. Please remember that in case of CE mark, an estimated 70% of the products can be placed in the European market, affixing CE mark based on self-declaration, which means no third-party intervention. There's a protocol. You are supposed to create a technical file. You are supposed to follow a particular protocol and then declare yourself that my product meets the European requirement and you can place that product in the European market. How they will judge you, that is through market surveillance. If you are caught, you will have hell to pay. 30% of those estimated products, they require third-party intervention, where they use what is called notified bodies, including in medical devices. The notified bodies will come and audit you, and once they have audited and given you a certificate, then the regulator will give you approval. But this is a typical European system. US FDA does not rely on any third-party bodies. US FDA in food started to rely on third-party bodies. Now they have a provision for relying on third-party bodies, but not in drugs and not in US FDA itself does. You know that US FDA does audits of pharma here by itself. So, as I said, you have to be careful. Where are you sending your product? Is it in Indian market? Is it outside? Is the product regulated? If it is regulated, look at the regulation and see what is the method of compliance prescribed. If certification is prescribed, then only go for certification. If it is not prescribed, largely in developed markets, it will not be prescribed. Then test report is enough, generally speaking. Submission of a test report is enough. In the voluntary market, yes, lot of voluntary certifications are there. You may be asked to, your buyer may ask you, or in your sector, you find every other person is holding a particular certification. So why not me? Well, please go ahead and do that. Please remember, certification costs money, and therefore, as many certifications you will get, you will spend that much money. So you have to take a business decision that it is worth your while, worth your money to get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 voluntary certifications. So I end here for the time being. Let's have an interaction. Let's answer questions. And if there are very specific certification details required, which I may not be able to answer, we'll get you experts to answer those kind of questions.
Thank you, Anil sir. So I'll just take up the question. The first question is, what all certification is required for organic waste management? The process is kind of like composting. Would there be any requirements from PCB?
Again, this is something I may not have a ready answer for.
Okay.
We'll have to check up this part. Whether Pollution Control Board has requirement for waste management. Generally speaking, Pollution Control Board applies to all factories. So the answer would be yes. There should be some requirements in under Environmental Protection Act. But specifically, is there an organic waste management? Is there a certification? I'll have to check.
Okay, sir. The next question is, we would like to process B Corp certification and would love to have suggestions on what other certifications will be helpful for organic product startups.
See, organic products, I'm assuming that you're talking of organic
Paper
food
or
products,
yeah.
organic food products. That is covered by, we know it is covered by regulation. Food Authority has a regulation on organic products. And even export is covered by regulation, which is what APIDA system was, Agricultural Produce Export Development Authority, APEDA, APIDA. So you'll have to go to one of the designated certification bodies. There are a number of certification bodies accredited by APIDA, which are also utilized under FSI regulation. So if you are in the organic space, it is regulated space, you'll have to go for organic certification. Now, if you want to export that organic stuff, till recently, till 21, even US recognized APIDA, APIDA system, but they have now not recognized. So you'll have to go to a USDA accredited body and get certification separately for exporting to US. Europe still recognizes APIDA system, so you can still export, and several other countries recognize APIDA system, so you can still export with that system. That's for the organic product.
And sir, if it is for stationery products?
Textiles, we have not regulated organic textiles in India. There's a very popular global organic textile standard, which is used for exports if you are exporting. Organic, please remember, organic has two ways of regulation. In India, for example, Food Authority has regulated organic food products. In some countries, organic is a kind of generic regulation, because it's not a safety regulation. Organic is a process. So if you make a misleading claim, you can be hauled up under that. If you make a misleading claim that your product is organic. So please watch out if you are exporting, watch out what kind of regulation is there in that country relating to organic. It may be a food specific regulation, it could be a generic regulation under which any misleading claim can be proceeded against. So that's how in some countries organic is covered. Stationery, at least I am not aware. In India, organic food production is only regulated, nothing else is regulated. So there's no regulation if you say this is organic paper or organic stationery or something.
Deepak, please unmute Anup TV. Okay. Till I'm taking
Somebody
the next
asked
question.
about recertification.
Yes.
See, recertification, only one sector is there in which recertification is very well defined, which is management system, the ISO 9000, etc. Recertification every 3 years. It's defined in international standard, every certification will be 3 years. When it comes to product process certifications, it's the sweet will of the person who has designed that certification system. In BIS, for example, regulation was taking place. Regulation was taking place. Okay, let me check out. From the mobile and back to. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So, what was I saying?
Regulations, recertification.
Recertification. In product process, recertification in BIS, for example, it is 1 year. Recertification every year. So it just depends. There is no fixed period. You will have to look at each certification, what is the prescription. But when you go for 9001, 13485, 14001, 45001, it's all 3 years internationally. There's no variation allowed.
Anup, you can unmute yourself and ask your question, please.
Yep, sure. Hello, sir. My name is Anup. I am the founder of a company called Insect Farm. What we do is we are actually involved in waste management. So that was the first question that I have raised. Because we actually do a process which is almost equivalent to composting. We are not sure what our regulation is required to actually ensure that the Pollution Control Board regulation requirement actually is complying for it. Because what we know is composting does not require a Pollution Control Board requirement.
Okay.
The second part is the byproducts which actually comes up from our process is also organic fertilizer. And the second part is insect protein, which is further processed as an ingredient for the feed industry. So what is the regulation requirement for us to actually process it and sell it out as a feed ingredient, which actually could compose the fish meal or the soy meal, which is currently there?
So you said organic fertilizer. Just look at, there is something called a fertilizer control order which prescribes requirement for fertilizers in India.
Yes, sir. For the composting, the Fertilizer Act is what we actually comply for. So
Yeah,
as long
yeah.
as that actually complies for, we actually are okay with the Fertilizer Act.
Feed, is it regulated in India? To my mind, not.
As of now, no, sir, because we actually have inquired with NIFTAM. We actually have
there
actually
are
contacted.
some internationally known schemes, like there's something called Farmy QS, which is for feeds.
Yes, sir.
There's
Yes, sir.
something called Farmy
But
QS.
for India, there is nothing, sir. So we want to actually
Yeah.
ensure that, okay, if at all we are actually getting a certification, what is the requirement for it?
So,
Because one of the
my suggestion would be check up whether there's a BIS standard for feed. My suggestion to all of you is, first thing you should check up is there a BIS standard for your product? And if it is there, then BIS certification becomes a distinct possibility. One way
Okay.
of getting endorsement for your product.
Because what we actually have checked it, sir, FSSAI says like they have actually implemented the APIDA system into the FSSAI standard, so there is only one standards now.
That is
But if we are
for
looking-
organic. That's for organic.
Yes, yes, sir. And
Yeah.
even for this one, they do not have any regulation which actually says like for insect feed, this is what the criteria is. Because why I'm actually asking this question is, we actually won a grant from BioDAC and they are actually asking us the regulatory requirements for us to actually pass it out as a product. Now there is no regulation which actually says like, okay, if at all it's insect protein, this is what the regulation requirement is. But what we actually send it for analysis is to certain feed companies. Let's say, for instance, we actually send our product to the feed analytical lab in Tanuvas, which is one of the premier institutes for feed manufacturing. Would it actually comply enough to actually get a statement from the authority saying like, yes, I have analyzed it from that and they have actually used a standard which is equivalent to ISO standard, which is for the feed, not for the feed or food.
Something I can read is that FSI has taken some initiative to regulate animal feed. So you'll have to look at if this is it's animal
Yes, sir,
feed.
but we have actually seen the notification saying like it came in 2019, but still now it has not been come into access.
Insists on BIS compliance for now. So BIS must have standards. Please look at BIS standards for feed.
Okay, sure, sir.
Yeah.
As for the waste management, is there anything that we have to do for any standards, sir, like pollution control board or anything in that requirement? Because it is composting process.
Let me check up and come back to you. I can't straight away answer this question. Just note down these questions, Vatsala,
Yes, sir. Sure.
and pass on to all the questions you can pass on.
Sure.
Whatever answer I
Thank
give
you.
today, if I can make it better in the future, I'll after some consultation, I'll make it better and pass it on back.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you.
Thank
This
you,
is all the
Anita.
questions that I have. And the last question was, if at all we are actually manufacturing a feed ingredient, what is the requirement for GMP standards, sir?
Feeding
should we-
what?
For let's say we are actually going for the feed ingredients, right? So we actually get an compliance saying like, okay, this ingredient is safe for use. Now, if you're actually manufacturing into a compound feed, then the scenario actually changes where you actually have to have a factory which is complying to the GMP standards. Good manufacturing practices. So, who could I actually get in touch with to actually see whether what are all the standards that is good? Because our factory is not constructed yet. So, who can we, get in touch with to actually see like, okay, these are all the standards that it must comply.
See, good manufacturing practices under Food Authority are prescribed in the licensing, the regulation as Schedule 4.
But does it also comply for the animal feed, sir? Because ours is completely in the animal feed.
I would suggest look at BIS standard for animal feed GMP if there is a separate GMP for animal feed. That will be the best bet to begin with.
Sure, sir, of course. Thank you, sir. Thank you for your time.
Thanks, Anup. Yeah. Please
Thank
write
you,
your
ma'am.
questions to me. I'll take them up with you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Okay, I can see somebody has asked a question. We are designing an innovative propulsion system for civilian and military use. It's not a single turbojet engine. What will be the certification required for a product that has no reference point in it? So this is a product which will be used by aerospace industry. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
I think you should look at AS 9100. Anything that you create for aerospace industry generally would need AS 9100 certificate.
Okay, thank you, sir. Yeah. Next question here is, are there any costs associated with the certification process? If so, what are they, especially sustainability?
Every certification costs money. And every certification costs money, which can vary, cost can vary. For same ISO 9000 certification, An MNC may charge you 50,000 rupees, an Indian certification body may charge you 25,000 rupees. And I'm talking only of a genuine good certificate. There are people who, in 500 rupees, will give you an ISO 9000 certificate. Please don't go for such certificates. Please remember, ISO 9000 certificate cannot be given without an audit. So there are a whole lot of dubious players in Indian market who will offer you, please give me your PAN number and I'll give you a certificate in 4 hours. So don't go for those certificates, even though sometimes these certificates do work because your buyer doesn't know there is something called an authentic 9000 certificate. In fact, next part of my presentation is about authentic certificate, which I've already done. You can circulate that to these people. I don't want to make this presentation today.
Sure.
So please be careful about what kind of certificate you get. You should get an authentic, accredited certificate. Whatever certificate you get, please make sure whatever test report you get, it's an accredited lab. Please make sure the certification body is accredited, properly accredited, preferably accredited in India so that you can at least complain somewhere, check it easily, etc. So NABL is accredits in India. There are 2 more private accreditation bodies called QAI and FDAS who accredit labs. For certification bodies, there is only one accreditation body in India called NABCB, where I was CEO. So go to the NABCB website, you will see a list of accredited certification bodies. For product also, for QMS, for food safety management system, for information security management system, for personal certification, all kinds of. So look at a proper certificate. That's all I would say.
So just one question.
But cost very difficult to tell you what would be the cost. Depends on each certification. Foreign certification naturally will cost more. Indian certification will cost less, no doubt. But very difficult to say what cost.
Okay, next question, sir, is we are into menstrual hygiene sector producing biodegradable super absorbent sheets for making pads. We also have ISO certification for our raw materials. Recently, we have developed a pad making process which reduces 90% single-use plastic layers. Please suggest me how to get certification for this process.
As I said, one is that I'm just trying to remember whether the product that you are mentioning gets covered in the definition of medical device. If not, then there was a quality control order on healthcare textiles, in which probably sanitary pads were covered. But again, my suggestion to you would be to look at BIS standards. BIS has standards on almost all kinds of products. In fact, it would be good if there's a BIS standard, then you can seek BIS certification. If there's not, recently Vatsala referred somebody to me and he said there's no BIS standard. I said, at least make a beginning, propose a standard to BIS, make a draft specification. On the BIS website, there is a provision to make a proposal. And if you make a proposal, BIS could make a standard so that you can get certified later on, if not today. But first thing would be look at BIS standard. If there's a BIS standard, you are, in good hands in terms of getting at least BIS certification.
Okay. Next question, sir, is to understand carbon footprint measurement and certification standards to measure showcase impact. Certifications for organic and non-organic GMO seeds.
If you are talking about carbon footprint, okay, there is number one, you can always get your emissions quantified and get them verified. So there is an ISO standard 14064 part 1, which applies to quantification of emissions. And there are validation and verification bodies accredited by NABCB. If you go to NABCB website and look under ISO 17029, this is the standard which applies to verification bodies. They are called validation and verification bodies. There are a number of them listed there. They will come and verify and give you a statement of verification. That's one part. There's another standard called ISO 14067, which is on carbon footprinting. So there, that possibly will help you, measure the carbon footprint and then get it verified again independently.
Can you suggest any certificate for robotic startup and semiconductor startups? Please suggest something in the automobile sector.
Automobile sector, as I said, there is something called IATF 16949, which is very, very popular worldwide. Any auto component manufacturer of any kind should be looking at that certification because no a giant auto maker will buy a product unless you are ISO. Tier 1 suppliers have to be ISO 1, not ISO, IATF 16. It used to be ISO 16949 earlier. Now it's called IATF 16949. From the tier 1 suppliers, the automakers like say Maruti or Hyundai, they usually require 16949 certificate. From their tier 2, tier 3 suppliers, they may settle for 9,000 baht. So you should look at 16949. That was the automotive part. The first part, can you reread the first part, Vatsala?
Suggest a certificate for robotics startup and semiconductor startups.
Look at BIS standards, look at IEC standards. There ought to be standards for robotics. Robotics not a new subject. Sometimes BIS has adopted those standards. Please remember, sometimes, like for example, ventilators in medical devices, BIS adopts. And BIS has two ways of adopting. Please remember that the standard could be, say, IS/ISO 9001. This means ISO 9001 as it is has been adopted by BIS. That's one way of adopting. Second way of adopting is, say, IS XXXX, ISO YYYY. This means standard is same. BIS has given its own number, and then down below written the actual ISO number. So you know that it's the same. It's called dual numbering. So just check up. Robotics, certainly there should be standards available. Certainly, if BIS standards are available, even if they are adoption of ISO IEC standards, then BIS could certify. If that is not the case, then we can find out whether there are bodies like UL which could probably certify these. Some of the multinationals who may be into this kind of certification, we can find that out. We can follow this up, Vatsala, and we can find this out. But first,
Sure.
establish what is the standard available. So my first suggestion would be go through BIS website, see what are the standards available. They may be indigenous BIS standards, but more likely they would be adoption of IEC standards. Like ISO, there is another body called IEC, which operates in electronics, electrical, and IT area. If it's an adoption, BIS, of course, could certify. But if it's an international standard, the likelihood of having a international, multinational certification body certifying those is also possible. We'll find it out. We'll follow it up further.
Okay. Next question. I'll take up your questions, Anup, later on. What certifications are needed for an innovative aircraft propulsion system meant for military and civilian use? I think we've addressed this.
Yeah.
Where
Yeah,
to get, yeah. Okay. What type of certifications are required specifically for pulp and paper development?
Pulp and paper development. I don't think there's any regulation. First thing, voluntary certification, a lot of paper standards are there. Even Ecomark is there on paper. If you go to BIS, environment friendly paper can be certified. Also, okay, another certification. Since paper comes from forestry produce from wood, there is something called what is called chain of custody certification. The concept is that if I have paper in hand or I have a wooden furniture in my house, this should come from a sustainably managed forest and legally harvested wood. Now, for that reason, there is something called forest certification. Actual forest units are certified. And then wood coming out of that forest through the chain is certified. So at every stage, certification is done to trace that chain back, like traceability. So there is what is called certification, chain of custody, COC it's called. Chain of custody certification possible for pulp and paper. And there are two systems internationally. One is called Forest Stewardship Council, FSC. And the other is called PEFC, Program for Endorsement of Forest Certification. So either of these two options are available. There is a scheme owner in India. I took the name in my presentation also, NCCF. In fact, I work with them, Network for Conservation and Certification of Forests. They are into forest certification, but COC is PFC certification. So yes, you can get certified through that system also. Apart from, now COC is only a chain of custody, means traceability certification. The product itself look at BIS standard and there may be a BIS certification possible for paper. It is there. I know that it's possible.
And sir, this chain of custody certification will also be applicable for the stationery products. They asked a question on that.
If they are coming from forest produce, yes, it can be applicable.
Okay.
Anything coming from forest produce, which
Mhm.
means wood, largely wood.
Yeah, okay,
Like pencil also has wood.
understood.
Paper has forest produce as a base. Yes, chain of custody, it can be applicable. In foreign countries, it's a requirement. In fact, I remember in London Olympics, they had specified they'll use only paper which is FSC certified. So that make sure that all paper they use comes from sustainably managed forests and legally harvested. Yeah.
Next question is for certification. If there is not a standard yet for a product, some private institutions are certifying the product and it's well recognized by customers. What is the best way to proceed in such a scenario? Just get the certificate from private institution or or there are better preparation we can consider?
Well, as I said, there are a lot of private certifications which are operating in the globally, and if they are the demand of the market, you have to go for those private certifications. There's no option but to go for those private certifications. If there's no standard other than private, and that works well with the suppliers, well, please go ahead.
Okay.
Because
There's another.
not everywhere the BIS standards work, frankly.
Yeah, she's asked, another startup is asking how to count carbon credits.
Carbon credits, okay. Carbon credits are usually earned by implementing a project for emission reduction. Okay. And when you reduce, so you register a project, then you have an action plan. That project is first validated by an independent body called a validation and verification body, that it is as per the rules of that carbon credit system. Then through the, say, 3-year period when you are actually implementing the project and achieving emission reductions, there is a periodic verification by this verification body. And at the end of this process, when the project is completed, there is a certification by this verification body. Yes, this project has achieved the emissions. And then the owner of the program, he will grant you carbon credits. Those can be traded in the market. This is how carbon credit system broadly works. Now, there are number of voluntary carbon programs in the market. One is called VERA, VERRA. There is something called GOLD, I think. There is something called Global Carbon Council in Qatar, where I am actually a member in Global Carbon Council. There used to be a very well-known system of CDM projects, Clean Development Mechanism, under UN climate change, where also I am involved. But CDM is now on the way out. There's a new mechanism being set up under Article 6.4 of Paris Agreement, but not yet functional. So as of now, in India also, Bureau of Energy Efficiency is bringing out a carbon trading scheme, but not yet functional. So as of today, if you want to implement a project, there is in NCCF also, we have created a carbon registry called CRI, Carbon Registry India. So you can register a project, undertake a project, follow the rules of that scheme, and earn carbon credits. So there are a number of voluntary options available. As I said, carbon registry, GCC, Global Carbon Council, VERA, GOLD. These are offhand I can remember 4 or 5.
Sure. So we've come to the end of all questions. I think we have Anup. He has one more question. If you have time, we can take up his question.
Yeah, sure. Please
Yes,
go ahead.
Anup, please go ahead.
Hello, sir. The same questions that you had actually answered, sir. For the carbon credit, there are a lot of research articles which have actually stated like the process that actually goes for end-of composting is much more carbon negative than the process that is actually being implemented. So who should we consult to actually, because there is a lab scale development which actually has said like this is what it is. So how could we quantify it exactly, and who should we actually contact with for the Indian government? Because we do a service for the ULB.
No, quantify what?
The carbon emissions, sir, because what our process is, it's much more feasible than the one which they are actually using. So we actually want to know how much the carbon is being emitted, or the carbon which is emitted by the process which is actually undertaken by us, rather than the one which is actually being currently followed. So who would be the the agency or the jurisdiction who can actually validate it, or quantify it?
Where are you based?
It's in Vellore, sir, in Tamil Nadu, Vellore.
No, I know Vellore. Last week I was in Vellore, CMC Vellore. I was.
Wow, really? Okay. We are
Yeah,
very close to CMC, sir.
Okay, I spent 3 days in Vellore last week.
Next time you do come, do let me know, sir. So this is
Okay,
our quantity is, because
what I-
as
what
per
I-
the
what I-
research that
What
yes, sir.
I'll do is, you need to talk to some expert on carbon. I'm not the one. I do work with carbon. Again, my expertise is accreditation and certification. There are various aspects to carbon. There is a gentleman in Vellore itself called, his name is Channa Ghosh. So maybe I should reference you to this gentleman. Talk
Yes,
to
sir.
him.
If at all you could, it will be much more helpful, sir.
There's gentleman, Channa Ghosh. Vatsala, I'll give you the number.
Sure.
Let him talk to, with my reference, talk to him, see if he can resolve your problem. If he doesn't, then come back. I
Sure,
know
sir.
lots
Thank
of
you so much.
carbon related experts. So that's why I asked, where are you based? Best is to find a
Yes,
local
sir,
expert.
yes, sir. Thank you.
You can have an interaction. And it turns
Because
out
that is
that
what our concept is,
Vellore
sir.
is a
Because
very
when we
unlikely
actually start,
place to have a carbon expert, but still there is one.
exactly, sir. Because when we actually start our problem statement, when we actually affiliated with the ULB, we were able to showcase our process was much more efficient. But then there was no one to actually quantify it. So now through that we actually gone to a privatized model. We also would be able to implement the same for the ULB. But we do not have any calculative method to say, like, okay, this is what the current scenario is. This is what the actual scenario would actually come up.
Can you give me a one-page write-up also? Because I have somebody in Europe who is looking for not merely carbon credits is one part of it. He said, no, so investors are looking for projects which are actually achieving carbon reduction or carbon efficiency
Sure, sir,
without
sure, of course.
carbon credits being involved. So let me pass on this note to this friend of mine in Europe,
Sure, sir.
whether this could qualify under that kind of, the investment that he's looking for, and where people are willing to make investment.
Of course, sir. Because the only problem that we have is once
So
we actually came from the ULB.
Give me a one-page write-up.
Of course, sir.
Give it to Vatsala and then she'll pass it on to me.
Yes,
And
ma'am.
let me-
Vatsala, ma'am, if you can
Sure.
actually give me the
That we
format
can do
for it, I will
something.
actually pass it up to sir as soon as possible.
And I'll pass on the
Take
name,
care.
number of Mr. Channa Ghosh. Who
Yep,
happens
sir.
to be Vellore. Talk to him, and if he doesn't resolve your problem, come back. We should be
Sure,
able
sir.
to-
Sure, sir. Of course. Thank you, sir. Thank you for this opportunity, then.
Thanks, Anu.
Yep.
Okay,
Thank you, ma'am.
thank you
Thank you,
everyone
sir.
for joining. Thank you, Anand sir. Thank you so much for your time. It seems you're
Okay,
a dictionary
all
of everything.
All done.
Thank
Okay.
you, sir. Yes.
So,
Thank you.
so whatever questions you have, still give me a copy. A, B,
I will.
whatever this name I'll pass on to you. And wherever I have not been able to give precise answers, I'll see whether I can access an expert and get precise answers. Okay.
Sure, sir. Sure. Thank
All
you so
right.
much, sir. Have a good day. Have a good day,
Bye-bye.
everyone.
Bye.
Yep.
Bye,
Thank you,
everybody.
ma'am. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.